So, what's up guys? The topic for today, and what this talk is about, is called agree to disagree. We're going to get to that phrase in a second. Who has heard the phrase, never talk about religion and never talk about politics? How many of you do that? Like, is that a rule in your house? Is that a rule that you guys live by? Nobody? Wow, that's awesome. We're done then. We really are done. Okay, what about like family gatherings? Like, think of Thanksgiving, or is there a rule like, talk about other things, but don't bring this topic up, or like, don't bring this? Is that a thing? Okay, now we see some others. So, yeah, it seems to be kind of an unspoken rule. I don't know who made it up. But it's never talk about religion or politics. And I'm here to tell everyone that we should talk about religion, and we should talk about politics. There is this guy, his name is G.K. Chesterton. He is was a British writer, Catholic writer, philosopher. And his quote is, "I never discuss anything except politics and religion. There's nothing else to discuss." And it kind of makes sense too, because these topics, like talking about God and talking about how we live our lives, are super important. Other than that, you're left with movies, video games, sports, maybe whatever's going on in your life. The weather, yeah. So it wouldn't, but you never get to the heart of it. And sometimes it feels like you have to tiptoe around certain topics. So that's what I'm here to advocate against, and to let you guys know. So with the phrase agree to disagree, I kind of agree with it and I kind of disagree with it. I agree with it in the sense that if by that phrase you mean, okay, I understand that we have a different perspective, and we can respect each other for that, then that's fine. But if by that phrase you don't want, you're using it to avoid a discussion or to avoid a conversation or a debate, then that's where it can go wrong. I think this phrase could be really useful if you had to go, if you had to leave, you were in a hurry. It's like, okay, agree to disagree, okay, I'll talk to you later. Like, there's no more time to talk. But even then, I would probably say it would be better to say, we'll just talk again later, or like see you next week, or something. Because I feel like it's become such an easy thing to say, oh, we know we have two different points of view, agree to disagree, and you never talk about whatever the disagreement is ever again. And if it's something really important, well, it's never gonna get resolved, and then we're all in trouble. So, first of all, I wanna talk about Catholicism and politics. So religion, first point is that religion is above politics. So most people think that there's economics, politics, government, math, science, sports, like these are all like different categories, and that religion is just one more of these categories. But it's not, and it makes sense too, because if God is God, and God's law is God's law, then is there anything on earth or anything in the universe that does not belong to God, or that He does not have a say or input in? Of course not. So you start with that point. And then on politics, I think the word has become really charged, and people kind of cringe at, oh, like politics, I don't want to get political, I don't want to, and then you still say what you mean anyway. I'm not trying to get political, but, and then you say whatever you want to say. The word is kind of lost its meaning. So who has ever played Monopoly or Risk?
Yeah.
Let's go. All right, okay. So the word politics comes from the word polis, from the Greek, and it just means city. So politics is just like, how should you run a city? How should the city be run? How should a county or a country be run, or a state? That's it. When you're playing Risk or when you're playing Monopoly, you're deciding how you want to organize your little town and your little everything. Like, that's it. So when you say, talking about politics, it's just, you're asking, how do you think we should run things? Well, I think we should do this way. Well, I think we should do this that way. Why? That's it. And you talk about it. It's not that big a deal. So then when people say, I don't want to get political, we should encourage them, no, please, get political. Like, say whatever you want to say. Like, get it out. It's not a big secret. And if it leads to disagreements, okay, we'll talk about it just like we just did. We did these disagreements. And sometimes it's even fun to disagree. It brings people together. Now, there's some topics like that could be less important. For example, if I would ask you, like, which is the best Spider-Man? Is it Tobey Maguire? Is it Andrew Garfield? Or is it Tom Holland. Yeah, we could have an opinion on that, and we could probably debate, all day if you want. There's not a real answer. So that's not something that you would debate, or like Messi or Ronaldo. Like, who do you prefer? Aggies or Longhorns? Or just your preference or ice cream, like whatever. But there's some things that should be argued because the truth is important. The truth matters. I want to share two kind of stories. I'll start with, basically what I'm going to say is that I think that we can always look to different countries and see who does things a little bit better than us in some ways and like take the best. So some people that I admire that I think that are really good at arguing and debating are the French. They love to debate, they love to argue, they live to do that. And maybe you would say, oh, that doesn't make them happy, but that's just who they are, and I love the French. And there was a Swiss comedian that was talking about the French. She was living in France, and so Switzerland is known for being neutral in the wars, and everything has been neutral. And she thought, she was at a dinner party, and she thought that all these French people, adults, were just arguing. She thought that everyone was in a fight. And they just kept talking and talking, and then there was a pause, and then everyone seemed to agree, finally. And then she says, when that happens, one French guy has to always like say, although, however, and then like bring up something else, and then you're there for another 5 hours, like talking about whatever the thing is. They can't just stay at like, okay. It's like they like the disagreement. And also, she realized that when they were at this dinner party, that they're having all this argument, and then someone gets up and like goes and gets more wine or goes and gets more snacks. Like, oh, does anyone want anything? Like, and then she realized, oh, you weren't really fighting. You were just, this is the way you guys have fun. Now, I got to experience this when I lived in France, and with people, I was 20 years old at the time, but I saw teenagers do this. I saw like, this is just what they do when you go out. People do different things when they go out. What they do is they somehow always talk about politics, religion, and whatever's going on. Now, I was there, and I saw, I was there in 2015, and it's kind of a coincidence, actually, but I was there, and I was about to leave France, and my flight was to Russia the next day. So I just mentioned the word Russia. And because of 2015, like, the Crimea thing had already happened, Ukraine, like, all of this, and these two guys start talking, like, debating with each other. Now, I couldn't really understand a lot of what they were saying, so I'm just there hosting, like giving them snacks, giving them drinks. Now, the more they drank, the more they argued, and they just kept like arguing all night. And then they would turn to me, like they got really mad. Some of them to the point like, "Are you dumb? Like, do you not even understand like the history of Ukraine?" And I'm thinking, in 2015, like, I've never thought about the history of Ukraine. I don't know what you're like. Is this something we should all know? And I'm thinking these guys are geniuses, or they apparently they seem to be geniuses. And so, they're talking, and I realized that's just how they were still friends. Like, they just kept, even if it got heated, like, that brought them close, and then, eventually the night was over. But I really appreciated that about them. In France right now, there'll be an election in like 2.5 weeks. They'll have a new president, and they have TV shows where they bring in like young people, and they bring in common people, like you're a doctor, you're a this worker, I sell fruit, like, and then the president goes and the candidates go and talk to each one, like, what am I going to do? And they have TV shows where they bring in people that haven't voted in like 30 years or something because they're sick of politics and games. And the reality TV show is, can these candidates convince them to vote? And it's actually real. And so all their kind of TV and everything is centered around this, and I think that's very good because when you debate, you end up learning something new that you didn't know before. Worst thing that can happen is, I don't know, it gets a little intense, but you'll learn something new, and if you do it right, and that's what I'll talk about, is you will become better, you'll become more knowledgeable. Whereas if you do the opposite, and if you never talk about anything, what'll happen is you'll turn 18, now you can vote, but you've never thought about anything, really. You haven't thought about any of these issues or any of what's going on, and then, we can run into trouble. So I think it's always better to listen to different opinions and obviously keep God at the center, and that's the second part. So arguing and defending the faith is part of being Christian. It may seem like being Christian, like the Christian answer would be, let's just avoid conflict and like, let's just keep the peace and like, I don't want any tension. But that's actually wrong, and that's not what Jesus did either. You are a representative of Christ, and like we said many times, you might be the only gospel that people hear anytime, and you can't refrain yourself from telling the truth because someone might take it the wrong way or be offended. That's why you have to do it with love, but we're primarily called to share the gospel. And every time you do this, you will get stronger. There's a quote that I like by an Irish Christian philosopher, Edmund Burke, and he said, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men or women to do nothing." Which essentially means, if we don't do anything, then evil wins. So we're called to action, and we know this. Every time we leave Mass, go glorifying the world by your light. Go and do something. Jesus was an example of this. He was many times he tried to be tricked, or he didn't try. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were trying to trick him to prove, to see if he was right or not. So one time they asked him they were trying to learn about, or prove him wrong on marriage and the Mosaic law. And so they kind of give him a trick question of if this brother dies and he didn't have children, and he has 7 brothers, who should marry the wife, and what happens to that? And Jesus realizes that it's a trick question. And so he refocuses the question and he tells them, "You are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven." So here, he makes them understand that fundamentally, they were just trying to use the law to get more power. But he tells them that fundamentally what they didn't understand was marriage. So it brings them to that. Another example I think of is abortion. People we've talked about this before, so we're not going to get too much into it, but essentially, when it boils down to it, you go through all the reasons that people list, and they might list some very rare instances, like rape, or different circumstances that we can maybe sympathize with, but it still doesn't make it okay. But at the bottom of it, you'll get to something like this. It'll be, "Oh, I think we should be able to have sex before you get married. And then if I get pregnant, well, then I should have a choice, right, to do something about that." Whereas we would say from the beginning, no, sex is safe for marriage, and you don't run into that problem. So at the fundamental, you have if you trace it back, then it's that's where we disagree. You don't disagree really about all these other things. It was something else. So we should always try to ask questions and see, what is it that we really disagree with? So here are some tips that I think are good to how to effectively communicate and debate and do it with love. So the first one is based on Aristotle. He talked a lot about virtue and vice. So this is something that's always stuck with me, and I don't know if you guys know this, but virtue is always the mean, the average, between 2 extremes, between 2 vices or 2 deficiencies. So an example of this is courage. You want to be courageous. We're called to be courageous. But if you have too much courage, if you go too far into that, then you're a fool. You are someone who rushes into battle, who doesn't think before he speaks. If you never face any opposition, you're too afraid, you don't do anything. You don't want to be here, and you don't want to be here. You want to be in the middle. Same thing with honesty. You're called to be honest. If you're too honest, you can be rude. You can be insensitive. If you're not honest enough, well, then you're a liar. So you want to be in the middle. Some other tips is that, like I said with the French example, arguing is not fighting. If we already do that, then great. Most people, I think, also think that arguing means you're having a fight. No, arguing is just, I'm presenting my information like this, you present your case, and we can discuss it. Some other things, you can get into an argument if you want, and even if you don't have all the information, that's okay. Nobody can know everything. Some ways to kind of keep the peace and just keep it open is essentially say, "I don't know enough about the subject. I'll get back to you," or "I'll have to research that." You can say that. You can say, "Hey, let's talk again next time." Or "Here, send me anything so I can look at that. Where are you coming from with this?" We should also be open to the idea that we might be wrong. If you go into it with the idea, kind of with the debates we did, "No, I'm absolutely right," and that's it, that's period. Well, it's a closed debate from the beginning. You want to be open to that possibility. You also want to know your audience. You want to tell the truth, but you kind of have to pick your battles. You don't want to argue all the time with everyone. Pick your battles and kind of know who you're talking to, know who needs to hear what, and also know that, especially like in society now, people are very sensitive to certain things. That doesn't mean we shouldn't still tell the truth, but know how to do it, how to approach it. Some people, it can get, it gets very hurtful and personal. So always try to keep it about an idea. You're never like targeting a person, you're targeting an idea that they have. We can debate ideas. We're not talking about whether this person, we can't condemn it. Are they going to heaven or hell? We can't do anything like that. We should always argue towards peace, not just for the sake of it, like argue towards finding like common ground and finding something that you can agree on. You should also keep in mind like the question, is this true or is this not true? Not so much, how does this make you feel? Your feelings don't really matter too much in an opinion. Like they don't. You can be swayed by this. This can make you angry. This can make you sad. The facts can say otherwise, and it doesn't, like that, there's no place for that. With evangelization, we want to promote the gospel. And sometimes a good technique is just, you don't actually have to say anything. Like you don't have to present your case at all. You could just ask questions. You could ask your friend, why do you believe this? How did you get to that conclusion? What do you think about that? Tell me about this. Keep asking why. Like a little kid will ask his parents, like why? And then you'll get to the bottom. A good example might be, say you have a friend that is not Catholic, but is Christian, non-denominational, and they want to know about the Eucharist. It's not their fault that they don't know, that they can't receive the Eucharist, that they weren't taught what we were taught. But you can you can talk about it, like, well, have you ever considered, or like, why do you think that? And they might say, well, I think that it's not really Jesus in the Eucharist because Jesus was probably being figurative, like it wasn't literal language. It's like, okay, you can ask, well, why did he say that 5 times? They might say, well, for emphasis, okay, but it was still figurative, okay. Well, why did some people leave when he said that? And why didn't he correct them and say, hey guys, I was just being figurative, like, why don't you come back? They might say, well, I don't know. And then they might ask, no, it's still figurative. You might say, well, what about the word that he used? He said, like, nah, that's the word in Greek. Like, I want you to eat my flesh. And everyone understood that. And so you just keep asking why. And they might ask themselves that question too and say, okay, like, I'll think about it more. And you leave the conversation open because here's another tip, it would be, you don't just we obviously want to evangelize and we want more people to be Catholic, but we don't care just about like numbers, like, oh, I wish we had more people in the pews. It's not like that. It's, you care about your friend, you care about the soul of this person. You care about people knowing Jesus Christ and having a relationship with him. Same as what we tell you. We don't just want you to get confirmed because we told you or your parents told you, or to be Catholic because someone told you. It's, here's what it is. You decide if you want it for yourself or not. Some other tips are the intention that we have. So you can be absolutely right in your argument, your reasoning, the church might be behind you, but if you're just using that to like prove a point, like, hey, look at me, like, I'm so smart, or like, I'm right and you're wrong, your intention is wrong. Your intention is just to be correct, and you're not caring for the person's soul. So that, do this with compassion, and tell the truth in a loving way. Lastly, or almost lastly, we should also debate with God. Like there's nothing that says we can't ask God questions or debate with him. Like we could present it to him like, God, I've thought about this, I've been reading the Bible, I've been doing a lot of studying, I think like this should be this way, I think this is like this, and maybe you got it wrong. Tell him that. And see where it goes. Ask other people, ask priests, and see like, and normally like we said is like, when it's a debate between God and I, like usually we're wrong. But at least he doesn't prevent us from wrestling, from debating, from arguing. That is still good, and you will learn something. So, don't be afraid to talk about religion. Don't be afraid to talk about politics. Know that the Holy Spirit is with you. For those of you getting confirmed in 2 or 3 weeks, now it's sounding more important, doesn't it? You're going to need some backup. You're going to need something. And the Holy Spirit, Jesus said that you won't be alone. You will have the advocate with you. You have the Holy Spirit. So keep God at the center. And as it says in 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and with reverence.